Hello, my name is Chuck Wolf. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I've been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap: Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the Emotion Roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolf@cjwolf.com. Thank you and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And it is a pleasure to be back with you this week. For those of you who are regular listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. I know it's really important at times to have a regular presence on the radio. And every once in a while, though, I like to do an interview with someone I find extremely interesting. And last week, if you tuned into the show, you heard me talk with Cliff Lonsley, who is a very successful entrepreneur who created and sold a business that he established, and got to work with one of the greats in the fields of emotions, a fellow named Paul Ekman, who is credited with helping all kinds of people in the business of protecting lives, saving lives, defending the country, protecting against terrorists and other kinds of threats. He has taught people how to study facial reactions all over the world to determine when someone is lying, when someone is threatening, when someone is pretending to be something that they're not. He is absolutely brilliant at that. And Cliff really worked closely with Paul Ekman for a number of years before establishing what he calls his E factor. His E factor, if you wanted to listen more to it, it's not available on the archives. It is available on the WPKN archives. I will make it available on SoundCloud later, probably next week. And also I will make it available on the Public Radio Exchange, where those of you, again, who are regular listeners know that I put some of my favorite shows up on what's called the Public Radio Exchange. For anyone with a community or public radio station who wants to pay a small fee can put their programs up there and have people listen to them. The thing I like about the Public Radio Exchange a little more than the podcast system is the podcast on SoundCloud gives you like a line or two you can write about your program. On Public Radio Exchange, I can write a paragraph, or a couple of paragraphs actually if I want, explaining what the program is about so people know whether or not it's something they want to pay attention to or listen to. So I encourage you to listen to either one. I have SoundCloud. I have the Emotion Roadmap on WPKN. They listed over, I think, over 100 programs are there. And I have an equal number, I think, on Public Radio Exchange. Not all the same programs, by the way. The ones on Public Radio Exchange go back more years. And some of them, again, my favorite shows, so I put those up on the Public Radio Exchange. And last week I was talking to Cliff Lonsley, and I'm going to put a show up there. Excuse me. Cliff is someone that has really spent a lot of time trying to understand how do you measure emotional abilities. He's very familiar with the test that I helped to create the certification program for, the one that was famously known as the Mesquite. If you, again, a regular listener, you've heard me talk about the Mesquite. It's based on three people's names: Mayer for Jack Mayer, Salve for Peter Salve, and Caruso for David Caruso. And so it's the Mayer-Salve-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test, MSCEIT, Mesquite. And that is the standard bearer, really, for measuring abilities, measuring your ability to understand emotions, manage emotions, identify emotions, and use emotions. Those are the key branches that Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer discovered that were measurable, that represent differences in each of us, like IQ represents differences in each of us. While we all have an IQ, we are different in what we score on an IQ. And it isn't just about one number, it's about multiple numbers indicating where we have strengths and perhaps some weaknesses. That's true about emotional intelligence abilities as well. And you've heard me talk a little bit about the mosquito on the show. Mostly, though, what I talk about is the emotion roadmap. It's called the emotion roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And since I've been gone for a month, I'll take a few minutes to just tell you a little bit about what the show's about. The show is about the work that I did with Peter Salovey. Those of you that don't know, Peter's the president of Yale University. And with Jack Mayer. Jack is a University of New Hampshire psychologist, professor. And David Caruso, who has his own consulting business and is also works over at Yale University. So when I worked with the three of them, it was the late 1990s and the early 2000s, and I basically was asked to help them find a way to make what they discovered about emotional abilities useful. And I conceived of what I call the emotion roadmap. I named this radio show, the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. The tagline indicates that we can be more proactive in controlling our emotions and how we feel. Now, a lot of us were taught, I think, growing up, that you kind of have to play the hand you were dealt. You know, the card metaphor that whatever cards you got dealt, that's the hand you play. And so if you're feeling sad, then that's what you're dealing with, is sadness. If you're feeling happy or depressed or lonely or angry or whatever it might be that you're feeling, that's what you deal with. And then when this idea of emotional intelligence as a separate intelligence with different abilities showed up, we discovered that, you know what, we're really not stuck with the hand that we're dealt with. And while we can sometimes change our feelings, we can almost always change our narrative around our feelings. And so we learn from that we can be more in control of our feelings, and that's the idea of take the wheel and control how you feel. So I've been on the show this is my 14th year, and again, for those who regularly listen to the show, you know, you can call in. And if you've got something going on in your life where you're stuck, and this is what I've said before, is that what I find is when really smart people, and of course, if you're listening to this show, I consider you a smart person. But I think if you're listening to WPKN in general, I think it's smart to do that because it's such a great radio station for so many reasons, hopefully including my show. But the idea is that you want to be able to take control over what you're feeling, because what you're feeling often has a major influence on what you're thinking and what you're doing, how you're behaving. So if you want to change behaviors, if you want to change what you're thinking, if you want to change how you're feeling, the emotion roadmap is a tool that will be useful to you. And years ago, when Lou Pomalis, who was the original person who has volunteered close to 40 years now on the radio station, asked me if I'd be willing to come and be a regular programmer on the show, someone who comes in with expertise, not with musical expertise, although I love music too, but that's not my expertise. My expertise is this idea of how to help people become more emotionally intelligent about themselves, what happens internally inside each of us, but also what helps them to negotiate with other people about their emotions. And we're always doing that. We may not think we're always doing that, but you are. When you're trying to influence a child to behave in a certain way, when you're trying to get a colleague to go along with your decision, when you're trying to get someone who works for you to perform at a different, higher level, when you're trying to influence a boss to approve of something you need for your part of the organization to be successful, all of that is negotiating emotionally with other people. Again, you may not think about it that way, but I do. And I can explain to you, if you call, how you can think that way too and perhaps be more effective. That's the goal of the show, is to help you to be more effective in your life around all these circumstances where strong emotions are in play. And that's a lot of them. part of our lives, folks. That's really a good part of our lives to have strong emotions attached to them. So anyway, the goal of the show is to help people. And by helping people, I mean, if you have something going on in your life where you might be stuck, and as I said, smart people get stuck around situations where they normally are good problem solvers and excellent critical thinkers, but when emotion is involved, sometimes they feel blocked. They don't feel as successful as they might want to feel. And so what I try to do is to help people feel more successful emotionally by understanding and focusing on the emotions that are in play. So when somebody calls up and says, hey, look, I have a problem with somebody in my family who's not helping support my aging parents. Okay, what's going on? What are you feeling? How are your parents feeling? What is the sibling feeling? What is it that you want everyone to feel? How do we help to create the feelings you want that's going to result in the behaviors you want to see? See, because I see feelings as attached to what would make somebody want to contribute more to an aging parent situation, just as an example of how this works. Now, what if it's something to do with a colleague at work? What if you have someone who feels like they're competing with you instead of supporting you? A lot of times people at work feel like it's a competition. You're a peer of theirs, you're a manager at the same level, and you're both competing for the job that you know the person above you is going to leave for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're going to retire, maybe they're going to move on to another place, another country, another company. Maybe they're being promoted, but something's happening. A slot's going to become available, which is a move upward for you and possibly for someone else that might feel they're competing with you. How do we move from competition to collaboration and support of one another so that if you don't get that job, you want to support the person that does? Or if you do get that job, you want that person to support you. All that's very emotional. I'm sure you can see that. And so how do we think about emotions and plan for the ones that we want, not just for the ones that show up? How do we plan more effectively to be emotionally intelligent? That's what the show's about. So if you call in and I can help you, walk you through the emotion roadmap, which starts with what's your circumstance, what's your situation, give me a quick summary. Who is key to your circumstance and situation? Obviously you. Who else might be involved? Sometimes it's just internal. Sometimes it's just something going on inside you. That's fine. Or maybe it has to do with one or two or several other people, or even a group of people, or a whole company maybe. But who's key? Who is key? And I'll ask you that, and I'll ask you, who is key and how is he or she or they feeling? And how are you feeling? And what would be ideal to feel? And how do we get, that's the concept of a roadmap, from what you are feeling to what would be ideal to feel. So that's a little bit about the show. So if you've got something you'd like to call me about, the beauty of the show is I help you directly. It's for free in a sense. I mean, we're supported by funding from all of you out there who, you know, contribute to our ability to be here for you. We encourage you to do that. But at the same time, we're here for you. And I'm here for you today to help you try and navigate some of these situations that are challenging for you. And if you want to call, the number to call is 203-336-9756. Now, I don't have an army of volunteers standing by to answer your phone calls. So if you've got something you want and you want to talk to me about it, I'm on the air from 12 to 12:55, 5 minutes to 1. So right now, I have most of my show left to help you out. If you wait to the end, which sometimes people do, they think, yeah, this is actually a good show. I've heard a couple other people call, and I think I'm going to call, but you wait too long, and I can't help you because the show ends, and I'm not back until the first and second Wednesdays of each month, and that's a while from now. So if you want some help and you've got something you'd like to call me about, I encourage you to pick up the phone and make the call. And while I'm helping you, I'm explaining to you and everybody else that's listening how the emotion roadmap works, with the intent of everyone learning more about how this works so that it can help not only you, the person calling, but everybody listening. So the number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. I'll give you a minute. If you've got something that has to do with something at work that's challenging you, and you're not sure how to deal with it. If you're conflicted, uncertain, confounded in some way, let me help you sort it out by walking you through the emotion roadmap. If it's something at home, something in your community, something with family, something with friends, something with neighbors, give me a call, 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Sometimes there's a caller just waiting to call. That doesn't seem to be the case today, so I'm going to talk with you about some things that I like to bring up that I think are useful to chat about. So one, let me tell you a little bit about why I was so interested in Cliff Lansley's work. Cliff Lansley, who was on the show last week, that was the interview that I did with this fellow from the United Kingdom. By the way, he had me as a speaker to talk with a group of people all over the world who are launching this E-Factor assessment this month. That's all happening this month. It's very exciting, actually, for him. He's been working at this for 10 years to get this up and running. It's part of his PhD, and he has, I think, developed something very useful. So it's designed in a similar way to what the Mesquite was intended to do, which is to measure abilities. And it measures them in a sort of standard way that's out there that is familiar to people in the field of, like self-awareness or identifying what you're feeling. Self-management, knowing how to manage yourself. And your social awareness, what's going on around you? How are other people feeling? Especially those that are important to something you're trying to get done. And then how do you manage the social interactions with others? So that's sort of the way he's categorized the abilities, which is a little different than how the Mayor Salovey group did. But then sometimes one of the things that when I give this assessment to others, one of the things I tell people is that this measures your potential. In other words, you may have like you might be a brilliant mathematician, but never have done anything with it. You might be brilliant at identifying feelings, but not use that skill very, very often. You may be great at managing relationships with others. And if you're in sales or if you're in a key negotiating role where you're doing that all the time, or you're in a leadership role, you're probably using that skill a lot, potentially. But on the other hand, you may not. See, when we measure abilities, we're not measuring actual performance. We're measuring the potential to perform. So if we say you're able, that doesn't mean you're doing. Able just means you have the capability. You're not actually acting on it. So what Cliff decided was he was going to create not only something that measured your abilities, but he also included this idea of having other people that know you well, whether at work or at home, rate you on the same kinds of scales that he uses to measure your potential to see if you're actually performing in the way that you are capable of performing. Now, sometimes I would say, even though I'm capable of being extremely nice to people, I might find that nice isn't the best emotion for what I'm trying to get done. I might need something where it's more confrontational, and I might need to be harsh in tone and in expression and in consequence because I want somebody to change what they're doing. And it's really important to what I ultimately want to accomplish, or even what I think they are trying to accomplish. And so maybe I'm not being so nice as I am being provocative and confrontational in order to get them to understand the seriousness of the situation so that they don't take it lightly and don't kind of brush it off, and that they do respond effectively. So you might rate me then as Chuck doesn't know how to be nice. And then when in fact I absolutely do know how to be nice, but I'm choosing not to because the circumstance doesn't require niceness in terms of what it needs to be effective. I hope you understand the difference in that. Again, the number to call if you're interested in speaking to me about anything to do emotionally with what's going on in your life where you're a little bit uncertain or somewhat stuck, you can call in 203-336-9756. I often find if I get the first caller, then it's kind of like breaking the ice somehow in the wintertime. Okay, 203-336-9756. So the idea of emotional control and navigating the emotional white waters of what we live in. I mean, we're surrounded by all kinds of things that are emotionally challenging on multiple levels. We have the day-to-day stuff where, we forgot to pay a bill and we're late, or we missed a doctor's appointment or some other appointment, or we were supposed to, get a letter in the mail to get our passports renewed, and we missed the date. So we do things on a individual basis that are problematic, that everyday stress happens. And then we have the confounding pandemics that show up, like the COVID virus. That was enormously stressful for so many people for so long. And of course, the repercussions of that, particularly for kids who lost years out of school, whether in grade school, K through 12, or through the college and university or apprentice programs, people that lost those years, that has devastating consequences for them now, even still. So we have world events. We have, I was just traveling in Europe, and, Europe is impacted by what's happening in Ukraine, right? Who could believe we have that kind of war going on right now? Who would have thought that was possible? But I guess, we've had wars pretty regularly, actually. We've had sickness and illness, and maybe not quite the level of pandemic, but we've had different kinds of things come and go in terms of things that impact us on a worldwide basis, not just in our individual neighborhoods or homes. So, challenges emotionally abound. There's all kinds of them. And trying to understand how the emotion roadmap works is just simply understanding that, first of all, you want to think about how you are feeling now. In terms of what you want to get done, are the feelings that you have for whatever your current circumstance is, the feelings you really want, the feelings that are ideal for the circumstance? One of the things that I learned in the field of emotional intelligence in recent years is this idea that if what I'm feeling is sadness, and I need to feel inspirational because I've got a keynote to make to an audience who's hired me to come out and motivate their team, and yet something in my life has caused me to feel sadness. It's a legitimate feeling. I feel really sadness, not about the work that I have or the performance that I'm about to make, but about something in my personal life, about someone in my personal life. And there's a sadness there. What do I do with that? Can I somehow push that aside, put a little box inside my head somehow? Can I just push it aside and then gear myself up and change my feelings to be inspirational, motivational, really powerful and compelling in ways that motivate the people that hired me to come in and get them excited about the possibilities and prospects of what their organization is about to do? And the answer is yes, I can. I've learned to do that. Now, how do you do it? Well, sometimes you can actually change your feeling. Sometimes if you're, for example, I've had people call who are depressed and they just don't seem to have any reason for the depression. That is a feeling that's associated with a mood rather than an emotion. The distinction I make, other people make different distinctions around this, but I make the distinction that an emotion is based on something that just happened. An event takes place and I feel something about it. That's the emotion that gets created by the event and what I think about the event, how it makes me feel. On the other hand, sometimes I wake up and I'm in a joyful mood. I'm in a creative mood. I'm in a sad mood. I'm in a depressed mood. I'm lonely. There's no real reason for it that I can think of, except it becomes like a mood. The difference between a mood and an emotion isn't that they create feelings. They both create feelings. But mood is less connected to something that's clear in my mind, whereas an emotion is often connected to, I hate what that guy just did. He cut in front of me in line, or he took my parking space, or something that sounds familiar to you, right? That you might be really upset about, or maybe for you, somebody who takes your parking space doesn't upset you. It does upset me. But anyway, the idea is that, emotionally, things happen and cause us to feel something when an event takes place. But moods are much harder to describe why they appear. They just do. And some people have moods that are somewhat common to them. There was a sort of cartoonish character called Debbie Downer for a number of years. Some of you may remember. Every time she came in the room, she'd say something that brought everybody down. And she just carried that around with her. There was a cartoon character, too, that used to carry like a cloud above his head. Wherever he went, it was always raining. I mean, those are cartoonish, but they're cartoons based on what people have experienced in life or seen others experience in life. What do you do with all that? Well, I decided that this concept of a roadmap could really make a difference. If I know that what I'm feeling isn't helpful to what I need to get done, I ask myself, what would be helpful to feel? What would be the best possible emotion to experience in order to feel I've got a really good chance of being successful, whatever I'm trying to get done today? What do I want to feel? What feeling would go along with that kind of initiative that I have that's right in front of me? What do I want to feel? By the way, it's not always a positive feeling. Let's just say I've got to deal with something that made me really upset. A hotel bill. Shouldn't have happened. Something took place in the hotel. Normally, for instance, let's just assume that you were promised a certain room. You paid for a certain room. And when you got there, you were told that room, terribly sorry, not available. We gave you another very nice room, but it's not the room you wanted. And you want something done about that. You can't get a different room. That's not an option anymore. But is there some way the hotel can make that up to you? Is there something they could do? And so I want to go into that situation with controlled anger. Not screaming at anybody. That never, well, I shouldn't say never, but it doesn't often result in anything positive happening. But just going in and explaining, look, this is what I was promised. This is what I paid for. You didn't deliver. This has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with the systems in your hotel. Not you personally, but the systems in your hotel did not effectively produce the result that you agreed to when I said I was coming here. I'd like to know what you're willing to do as a hotel to make that right. Are you willing to buy me a dinner? Are you willing to give me a free night at the hotel? Are you willing to allow me access to the executive lounge if there is one? Will you buy me a couple of cocktails, a dessert? Will you do something for me? Give me a discount if I come back to the property. Is there something you can do? By the way, a lot of the things that you can do in a hotel setting don't really cost the hotel a lot. If you give my wife and I a meal, for example, let's say you say, I'm willing to give you 2 entrees. So now I go to the restaurant, I have 2 entrees, and because I'm not paying for the entrees, I might have an extra drink or 2. And those are expensive. And the hotel loses nothing. And if I have a good experience with the dining at the hotel, I tell other people, so they've got a nice restaurant. Doesn't hurt you at all as a hotel. So, I mean, if you think about how you negotiate those things, how you talk to people, you want to do it in a way that produces in them a feeling of support and caring about you. That's what you want them to feel. But you come in a little bit angry and disappointed in their performance. And that leads to, if it works out for you, some kind of compensation that helps alleviate. It doesn't change the circumstance. It doesn't give you what you actually wanted, which would be the best circumstances, that you actually get what you asked for and they deliver. But instead they give you something else instead that makes you feel like, okay, I'm okay with this now. And you move on. Sometimes they give you something that makes it really even better, so that once in a while, when there's an opportunity, some businesses think about it this way, where you've made a mistake as a business with a customer, but if you turn it around and do something really grand for the customer, they walk away actually bragging about you, talking you up. So you turn something that was going to be some words said about you later to their relatives and friends that was very negative and had a very detrimental effect. Maybe gave you a poor review in hotels.com or TripAdvisor or Expedia or Google or someplace that you really, if you're really upset, sometimes you'll write to all those places, right? And that's very negative for them because people read the reviews. On the other hand, if you happen to go to TripAdvisor and say, look, they weren't able to deliver, something happened in their hotel. It wasn't people's fault, but the system broke down. But you know what? The people were great, and they turned it around. They really made us feel special. Even though this happened, I'd highly recommend this place. People love that kind of a comment, both from the hotel and as you're reading it. Oh, well, okay, I'm willing to stay at that place. So I think emotionally there's a lot that we can learn that's really helpful to us in terms of how we negotiate externally. So if you have something where you're struggling a bit and want to see how this works with a live example, give me a call at 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Sometimes when I've been away from a while, it takes a while for people to want to call in. I haven't been on the air, so I wish in some ways, not that I want to do this every day, but if I was doing it every day, I think it'd be easier in terms of people would regularly call in just because they knew I was here. So if you know you got something, you want to call in, don't wait much later because I've got time now still. It's 12:32, and I've got the 12:55. So the number is 203-336-9756. Okay. So I'm still not seeing anybody calling. So let me just share with you one other thing I just want to comment a little bit about. Sometimes, okay, we got somebody. Just a sec. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to, please?
Oh, hi. My name is Jean.
Hi, Jean. How you doing?
Good.
How can I help you today?
Well, you were talking about controlled anger.
Right.
And trying to make it productive instead of non-productive.
Exactly.
So I thought I would call.
Okay. You got something you're angry about?
Well, they want to put big changes to our road where we live, and the changes, according to experts, would directly impact the quality of our drinking water. And we've brought testimony from experts and college university people and common sense, and we're met with blank faces and just no emotions, and they won't recognize our water. And it's created a town rift now for a year.
Gene, the couple things that I want to be clear about. One is I'm not going to help you change your politics necessarily, but I can tell you where I can tell you maybe where to look.
All right, so we get angry, and we want to try to present our case without sounding angry.
Well, okay, let's talk a little bit about that then. So you want to do this in a way that is controlled anger. Let me tell you a little bit about controlled anger, just to kind of set the table, if you will. The idea of controlled anger is something I learned about many years ago from a fellow who was in a very large consulting company called Booz Allen. I was a member at a Harvard Business School consulting club, and the fellow came in and he said, look, you got to understand, anger is something that we all feel at different times, but it's a terrible technique when it's out of control. You never want to be out of control. But when you use controlled anger, you want to use it as a kind of a last resort. You don't want to go there until you absolutely need to. But if that's where you are, and it sounds like that's where you are with what's going on, right? You've tried things very civilly, and it hasn't really worked out just yet.
Correct.
And so you've had expert witnesses come forward, and you've gotten kind of a blank stare. So so I always like to ask, what else are you thinking of doing before I suggest anything? And then I'll jump in and offer you some thoughts if they're different than what you've already thought about.
Well, we've been corresponding in the newspaper with letters, and we've been talking to people, and we've been trying to move, and we're hitting dead ends. We get support, but we're trying to convince the board that it would be better to keep the industry where it already is and not spoil this piece of property or hurt people's drinking water, which I'm sure they don't want to do, but we're trying to get them to communicate.
And what have they said back to you in terms of justification for what they're doing? There must be an argument that they have that they laid out.
That the modern industrial equipment doesn't leak, and that there will be no spills, and that the wetlands will be fine, and that everything is within normal precautionary. This is perfectly okay.
Why do they feel the need to move? Is that clear as well?
Yes, the old facility they let get dilapidated over 15 years, and it's a small area, but it's already the groundwater is already contaminated, and they feel like it will be inconvenient to rebuild there, so they just want a whole new site.
Yeah. Okay. So, what have you thinking about trying beyond what you've already done so far?
We don't know.
Okay, so you're kind of at a loss at this point.
We kind of are. We thought, that university professors. We've had someone here from Yale. We've done the history on the property. We've done the water, people's wells. We've gone to town meetings. We've gone to board of selectmen meetings. We're a nuisance, but we didn't know what else to try, and then it makes me feel frustrated because I feel like I'm talking to a wall, but it's very basic gravity and water concept.
No, I think you made it clear to me anyway what you're concerned about. So I always look for one of the ways of thinking about this is what am I missing is a pretty good question to ask when whatever you've tried isn't working. Oh. And so one of the things that you might want to consider is what am I missing? Who is, and this is the way I think about change. I think about, while you want to introduce this idea to a board, but the board is saying, hey, heard what you had to say, but we're not changing anything so far. And we're moving ahead with our plans so far. And then you want to ask, well, who is driving it and why? I always want to look at why is someone really so convinced this is an okay thing to do? And is there some way to influence the person or persons who might be key to this? So partly it's people on the board, and are they being influenced by people outside the board who are powerful people and may hold promises or offer things that are not necessarily legal or right or ethical, but nevertheless, there may be something in play here that is driving them to want to support something that doesn't sound like it should be supported, and just listening to you. So I'm looking always at what's the motivation and how do I change those feelings? Is there something or someone that's key to all of this that's sort of driving the train right now? And can you influence that person by looking really hard at who they are, what they care about, and what motivates them, and trying to understand what might be behind this? Because that's the only way you're going to try, I think, do something unique here, is to understand who are the people in this business driving this, and what is their influence on this group. Because there's something
We're
there. We're
almost scared to ask that because so much pavement is involved. We don't know what's pushing a couple of the people. They do like to pave things. They're into pavement. But we worry if we push too hard, we're going to hit something that we don't want to be involved in. But you're absolutely right. There are a couple of names that come up, but they're hidden in the shadows.
Well, I mean, again, it depends how important this is to you, about what you're willing to risk. But it seems to me, again, when I'm in a position where I'm stuck like this, I always want to ask myself, am I missing something?
Yeah, what am I missing? Because it would be at least a minimum of 26 wells are at jeopardy, private wells, and it's very hard to get town water in to these spots. So what am I missing? That's
huge. And so the repercussions of the business having to dig up and clean up where they've already soiled the contaminated the soil where they are, I think are they really going to go back and do that after they leave? Or are you going to have another?
Oh no, they're going to make it a second storage area, so they won't even have to deal with it.
Yeah. So I'm not sure you can change anything here, but if you have any chance at all, it's to try and look at the power that's behind this. Okay. What feelings are driving the people who are in control of it?
Anger. They have already sworn at us, and they insult you in the paper, in articles and stuff. Well, right at the very start, we were sworn at a meeting. We were referred to as the F word, the people that were opposed to the project. So there's a lot of anger behind our town manager. He's very angry, which is kind of intimidating, I have to say, but I'm persevering.
So holding a mirror up to that behavior for a town manager would make it much less likely that he'll be your town manager next time.
I know I don't want to be too frank, but you're right.
Well, you're looking for ways to try and change how people feel.
A mirror.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
So the key things are, am I missing something? Who is it? Who is really the power behind this? Why is he saying such awful things to people who are his constituents?
I don't know.
Well,
he called our road ugly. He called my husband a disappointment. He just says anything he wants.
Yeah. So, is this who we want for a town manager? I would.
Boy, that's a good question.
Is this the way we're going to be treated as constituents? They're coming for our street and our town and our wells, so they're going to come for you next. I mean, how do you build support and momentum in your town that kind of carries? You're looking at, what do you want people to feel here? You want as many people as possible who want it.
What do I want them to feel is a good question.
Yeah, that's the key to it. What do I want people to feel? What do I want this town manager to feel? I want him to feel like his behavior and everything he's done so far is going to be called out and mirrored, and it's going to be part of what's going to be campaigned against him going forward, unless the tune changes pretty radically, and he's really supporting us and working with us to try to find a way to resolve this.
And I want the people, when I write my letters, to sound like they would be on my side a little.
Right. So how do you... So this,
that would sound like I'm whining.
Yeah. So how do you get more people to understand that, look, I realize this doesn't impact everybody in town. It's a number of us are being impacted with our wells, but it is a precedent. We appreciate whatever support is out there. Anybody else who's willing to support us, please come to these meetings. Please stand up for us. And we'll want to stand up for you when you have a need for something like this. But this goes against the grain. It's obviously something that, while they promised certain circumstances, nobody thought that the property was going to be contaminated when they first put that up there either.
Right.
Right, and now they're promising us this property, this won't be contaminated. How do we know that? How do we safely give our kids drinking water, knowing that this is happening and we don't know what's really going on under the ground? How will we ever know? And I think you try to make it personal. You make it about your family. You try to bring more people in, because you say, if they're coming for us now, they could be coming for you tomorrow. That's one of the messages that's out there about. It relates to anti-Semitism, lots of other things. It's a message that says, look, we have need, and you're our community. Can you help support us?
Yeah, like we really need to stick together.
Exactly.
It's not just a not in my backyard thing. It's a big thing.
But I would hold up the town manager's behavior. That's really, irresponsible on his part to be doing. To be calling your names when you're trying to protect your family, right?
Yes, and what's frightening, and I won't hold you up, though, is how much people egg this behavior on nowadays. They love it. They're like, cheer for this kind of thing.
Well, I think a lot of people are caught up in political,
frenzy.
Yeah, I think they're political madness in some ways. But I think, again, you're looking at how are people feeling. So the people that are caught up in it, that are somehow... You want to turn that around, too. I always think that in any group of people, there's people that are going to be supporting the change I want. There's going to be people that are neutral, and there are going to be people that are really against the change I want. There's always groups like that. And I look at the group that's against the change I want, which is the powerful people here, and say, what can I do to them to get them to reconsider their positions? One is I'd hold the town manager's behavior up to him as a mirror, and call out, is that who we want for a town manager? Do we want somebody doing that? And then I'd try to engage people who are powerful in your community, not just random, not just notes in the newspaper, but who are the powerful people that impact your community, who seems to be the community leaders, and ask them for their support for this, and see if you can create feelings in them that they want to come to your support. And that will lead others to gravitate towards you if you can do it. And then finally, the people that are going to do this, that want to do this, that are desperate to do this, you want to make it feel so uncomfortable for them that they decide this isn't worth doing.
Oh, I like that word, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because that's not really accusational. It's different.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable and awkward.
Yeah. And who are their families? And do their families not care about well water for other people's families and kids? I mean, who influences those people that are going to work every day, and what do you know in terms of, like, if they're out in the news as people that don't care about the drinking water or for young children and families, and they got a promise that this is not going to leak, well, did anybody believe that their earlier facility was going to leak? No one believed that was going to leak either. So while I guess there's new technology, it's possible it might not leak, but what if it does? Then what? So I hope that's helpful to you, at least give you some ideas.
Totally helpful. A couple of those things are fantastic. The mirror image I really like, and I really like the fact that you don't have to be mean, but you can make people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, because I think you've got a legitimate concern here, and you've tried to deal reasonably with it, which is how most people start, and then you raise the temperature because this is too important to let slide. So.
Thank you for whatever that word is, agreeing with the water is important.
Well, sure it is, and I can't say you're right. I can't say you're right, but I am trying to help you with the understanding of emotionally how all this plays out.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Glad I put the radio on today.
Okay, thanks, Gene. You have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, folks, that's how it works. So try and think about how you're feeling, whoever's key to what you're trying to get down to this feeling, how you want them to feel, what it's going to take to create the feelings you want, and what you can do to make the changes happen. Now, again, I don't know if Jean's argument is a good one or whether she should be concerned or not, but obviously she's very concerned. If it was my family and I had children living in not just children, but myself, but I think when you say, hey, what about our children, that raises the temperature for everybody who's considering the issue, right? Do you want young kids drinking poisoned water? That's the message out there, right? Of course not. And while they tell you that it's going to work fine, it's not going to leak, well, no one, gotta believe, thought this other facility was going to leak contaminating materials into the soil either, but it did. So I don't know that I can take anybody's guarantee. I don't think they're lying. I just don't think anyone really knows. So you don't want to make them wrong. You don't want it to be confrontational, but you want it to be informative and powerful and compelling. Okay, again, the number to call is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. And I'm Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio. And we do count on listener support, so I hope you're out there supporting us in whatever ways that you can. We appreciate any way that you can help us. So the other thing I was going to mention today, but I'll give the number one more time. And I got time just for one more phone call in case you want to call. 203-336-9756. So I tell you, don't wait and be sorry you didn't call. You got something? I got just enough time. 203-336-9756. Okay, so I'll tell you what I was going to tell you then. So one of the things that happened recently is someone got fired from a job. And they had performed very well in that job, but a lot of the people felt like they were pushing them too hard, and they just didn't like them that much. And they weren't the overall boss or owner of the organization. And they decided that some of their players, who were really, really talented players, were, they weren't going to perform at their best. They didn't even know if they'd be able to keep some of them unless they decided to let the person go who was in charge of them. And try with a different leader. Some of you have heard stories like that or been around people who have lost their jobs, and maybe because they were too intense or pushing too hard for a really key result. And then you saw that, and maybe you thought that was the right thing to do too. What I want to so those of you again who are regular listeners know that I'm kind of a sports fanatic, if you will, around Boston sports. And one of the things that happened this year was that two teams in the Boston area. I'm from Massachusetts originally, so you grow up like that. It's part of your growing up. It's part of your identity. You might call it part of your religion in Massachusetts is to be, a huge sports fan for the professional teams there. So anyway, two teams this past winter and fall were dominating in their conferences. One was the Boston Celtics, and one was the Boston Bruins. So I want to talk just a bit about the Bruins for a minute. So the Bruins, they had a record-breaking season. After they fired their coach, Bruce Cassidy, who people on the team complained about, that he was a little too tough. He called people out when they didn't perform well, and he wasn't just singing everybody's praises. He pushed people. He pushed people to get them over the top so that they could win the Stanley Cup, which is the ultimate goal in professional hockey. And so he tried. He got really close. One year he got to the 7th game. Didn't quite have enough toughness, it felt like, as a Bruins fan watching them. And they lost to a St. Louis team. And so he tried again, and he came close, but he didn't get the cigar. And so they decided to move on from him, and they put in another fellow, Montgomery. And Coach Montgomery, he had an amazing season. He was laudatory of all his players, so complimentary, so always praising and talking about how talented his team was and how great everybody did. And he got them to perform at the highest level any hockey team ever performed in a regular season. Best record ever. He got to the first round. He played a group called the Florida Panthers. So the Boston Bruins played the Florida Panthers. The Panthers had to win an extra game just to get into the playoffs. They barely survived to make it into the playoffs. And then they beat the Bruins in 7 games. They were down 3-1, and the Bruins couldn't close it out. They weren't tough enough. The Panthers were tougher than them. The Panthers went on and then had some great series against other really good teams. And then the Panthers got to the finals, and they played against the Las Vegas Golden State Warriors. And the Las Vegas team was coached by Bruce Cassidy. After Bruce was fired by the Boston Bruins, he got hired by Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas essentially had mostly the same team that they had a year ago when they didn't make the playoffs. But they'd been in the playoffs a bunch of years. They just never got over the top. This year, Las Vegas dominated. I mean, really dominated. And they just finished winning this championship for the Stanley Cup last night. And I tell you this story because it's a bit about redemption. One of the things that one of the players said was, somebody asked him, so how did Cassidy make much of a difference in the locker room as the coach? He said, I don't know that I didn't think that we needed it, but he brought a level of intensity that I guess we needed. Now, he wasn't saying that compliment. He wasn't complimenting Bruce Cassidy. He wasn't saying that was great, because I think Bruce lit it up. I mean, he said, if you're not playing the way you need to play, find something else to do. Bruce was demanding, and he got them over the top. So, story about redemption, about, I've had coaches in my life that really pushed me hard, and you know what? They got the most out of me, and I thanked them for it. Not at the time, but then later. Anyway, I thought it's an interesting story, so I thought I'd share it with you. Anyway, you've been listening to Chuck Wolf. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm on the first and second Wednesdays of each month at 12 noon to 1 p.m. as part of the community strip. And I do want to say to you that if you can afford it, please donate. This is a time of fundraising for WPKN. It allows us to stay on the air when you can afford the funds to help to take care of the new beautiful station we have and to help out with all those people that do their volunteer programming. I hope you like this show and all the other shows on PKN, and I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful week, everybody. And go to the website and donate if you can. Take care. Bye-bye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.